I apologize for the camera shake. I haven't quite set up my GoPro mounts in the car yet, so I'm using my phone in a phone mount, and the phone doesn't have nearly as great stabilization as the GoPro. What's going on, Daytona fans? Welcome back to another video, and in this one I'm going to talk about the differences between the Daytona and the Hellcat. Now, before we get started, I'm not talking about horsepower numbers. That's just not fair, and that's really comparing apples to oranges. So, with that aside, let's get started. The first thing I noticed was the hydraulic steering. In the 2016 Hellcat, it uses hydraulic steering. The 2017 Daytona uses electric steering. So what does that mean? That means that right when I got in the car, I noticed it immediately, especially when you're going from full lock and then you're turning to the other side. And the hydraulic steering, I don't know if that's the way it's programmed or if that's the way it's supposed to be. When you're in full lock and then you turn back the other way, there's a little hesitation between you inputting that into the steering wheel and then the steering noticing that you want to do that and then complying. Versus the 2017 Daytona, which has electric steering, the moment you decide to turn left or right, it just does it, and there's no hesitation. It's like it knows you're going to do it, and it's just a smooth transition. Not that this is a bad thing on hydraulic steering. It is what it is, and it really doesn't bother me at all. But it is the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed were the seats, and the seats were much softer on the Hellcat. On top of that, this is an all-leather seat versus the 2017 Daytona, which has suede inserts. And I personally like suede better, but you know what? That's what the car came with, and that's what I'm sitting on. With the 2017 Daytona, the seats were a lot stiffer as far as the cushioning goes. Now, this could very well be because I haven't worn the car in enough, but I don't think so. I had the car for about 2 years and about 17,000 miles on it. I think by 17,000 miles, the seats would have been worn in, but who knows? This car had 21,000. Maybe 21 was the sweet spot, and I just never got to it. But the cushions were a little bit stiffer. The Hellcat cushions, the moment I sat in it, it was a lot more comfortable, and it felt very much like a worn-in sofa, but not to the point where it was kind of gross. But I hope you understand what I'm trying to convey here. Number three, the third thing I noticed is the suspension. Now, the 2017 Daytona, the suspension was very bouncy, almost like the shocks had blown out. Every time I went over a bump, it just felt like I was going up and down a lot afterwards. But once I installed the aftermarket springs, everything stiffened up, and it felt more like what the Hellcat feels like on default setting. Now, what that means is that it actually is a very decent ride quality. It doesn't bounce, and of course there's a little bit of sway. It is a heavy car, but with the springs on the Daytona, it feels almost exactly like the Hellcat. And when I'm driving around the streets, it's no problem. It's just like any other Charger out there. Number four, the fourth thing I noticed is that the pedal is a lot more sensitive, and of course it is, because there's more power behind the car. But at the same time, the pedal is exactly what controls how the car feels. And what I mean by that is that with a little bit of pedal, it can act like a V6. It can act like a 5.7, 3.2, and all the way up to a Hellcat, depending on how hard you press the pedal. I realized this just through my driving experience with the Hellcat, that with a little bit of pedal, it just goes like any other car on the road. And when you give it just a quarter or even halfway throttle, it just breaks loose. It must feel like a 392. I haven't really driven one, but it can be as tame as you want it to be, or it could be as menacing and crazy as you want it to be. And that's one of the things I really love about the Hellcat. It's not always trying to claw at your throat, but you know what? It's always there waiting to do so the moment you step on the pedal. Number five, Now, this is my own fault. I probably should have done the research, but there's no Apple CarPlay, there's no Android Auto in the 2016 Hellcat. When I plug my phone in to the USB, it'll play whatever audio files that I have in my phone, and all that's there are ringtones. So I have to turn that option off, and then when I plug in the phone, I have to use Bluetooth. Now, Bluetooth is good and great, but I do notice the sound is a little bit worse than if it were to come straight from the phone files, and I think that's just a streaming thing. I use Spotify, so I think it's just the quality is a little bit worse when you're streaming. So those are the 5 things that I noticed almost immediately when I bought the car. And not that any of this stuff is bad, but it's just what I noticed. In the comment section below, please let me know if you guys gone through this transition, and if you have, what did you notice? I mean, what was new and different for you? I'd really like to know if anybody's on the same boat and found these pretty interesting things when they went from one model to another, or one year to another, but keeping the same model. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you found this educational and entertaining at the same time. I will see you all in the next one.